Hi, Stacey.
Hi, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited and no, I'm just excited to talk to you about some of my EA
Were you going to say you're
progress.
a little nervous? It's okay to be a little
I'm
nervous.
not nervous because I did better than I thought I would.
All right, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so let me just tell you what I did first. Well, for folks listening who didn't listen to our first conversation, my homework was essentially to take a practice exam. And I did a little bit more than that, but not much more. So the first thing I did almost immediately after we spoke was I did the question sampler, the EA question sampler on MBA.com. I've shared on my screen here. So it's 4 IR questions, 3 verbal questions, and 2 quant questions. I got 2 of the 4 IR questions right, 2 of the 3 verbal questions right, and only 1 of the quant questions right. On average, I took, I guess, like a minute and a half to answer.
Which is kind of fast. You have a little over 2 minutes on the test.
Yeah, that's a question I have for you for later, which is about time management. So here are my IR results. And the first question I got wrong was a multi-source reasoning.
Multi-source reasoning are really annoying. So I will say, normally on the real test, you're going to get 3 questions with a multi-source reasoning because there's a lot of information to try to understand up front. So you need to invest like a minute and a half up front to just kind of like look through all the information before you can start answering questions. But that's okay because then you're going to answer 3 separate questions based on this. If you're doing this in the sampler, though, they just give you a single question, so the time pressure is a lot greater just in the sampler, just because it's not being presented like in the real way that it would be on the test. But what you're going to see with multi-source reasoning is up at the top. So you can see that Zach had a table here with like a little blurb at the top explaining the table, but there's actually a second tab of information. So there's 2 tabs up there. So click over to the second tab. This one also has a table in it. These multi-source reasoning can have anything. So it can have just text. It can have a table. It can have a graph. It can have a combination of text and table or text and graph. These were really built to mimic case studies, which most business schools use as part of their curriculum. So it's basically like mixed information, lots and lots of information, and then analyze it and go answer some questions about it.
I have to say that when I was completing this, I did not remember that there was another tab, which is very embarrassing for me to say because I'm GMAC Zach. I know everything about the test, but I made like
I will say
the
the
mistake.
interface, yeah, the interface here is not quite makes it less obvious than it does during the real test. Those tabs are like bigger, they're more obvious. It's more obvious that you need to click into them or that they're there. So this is not quite mimicking the interface of the real test.
So moving on, I got the next question right. I believe this is a table analysis.
This one's now a table question. So the difference between this one and the prior one was that this one doesn't have, first of all, this one doesn't have multiple tabs to look at. And second of all, this one, the table is actually sortable.
Yes.
So you can sort by the different columns. And in fact, you're probably, on most questions, you're going to want to do that because that will help you to answer faster if you're sorting the data by whatever they're asking you about.
And something I realized when I was taking this is that you can only sort one column at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't do like multi-level sorting.
So this third question, this is the one I got wrong. Is this a graphics interpretation?
This is a graph question, exactly. And there's 2 broad kinds of graphs you'll see on the test. You'll see what I'll call like classic graphs like this one. So it's something that's like, if you look in a textbook about graphs, you're going to see column charts and bar charts and pie charts and whatever, standard kinds of charts. You can also see just diagrams. And some of these are things you've seen before, like a hierarchy chart or an org chart or something. And some of them will be diagrams that have just been completely made up for the test. And what they're doing in that case is essentially assessing, like, can you look at visual information, decode it, understand it, and then go answer a question about it.
Yeah. And I think I made a silly mistake on this one because I just think I misread the designs of these bars, if that makes sense. So I thought I was answering food service, but I actually answered farming. And I just kind of felt like the hatching on these bars was like,
It
I
was a
think
little tough. And I will
a
say
little
again,
tough.
on the official test, it's more clear. It's a little hard when you're just doing stuff on like a web browser, right? So
Yes.
But on the official test, it's super clear that there are also issues around like if somebody's colorblind, right? So like all of those things have been taken into account on the official test to make sure that it's super clear for folks. I will say though, you know, one they're never going to design a trap that's just like, oh haha, I made this one too close to this other one in terms of the hashing. Whatever, it's not like they're not trying to trick us in that way. But it's certainly the case that one of the things they're testing obviously is our ability to parse the information on the graph or the table or whatever. One of the things that I recommend for both tables and graphs is before you go to the question part down below and you're just trying to understand the graph itself and like the little sentence or blurb that they gave you about the graph, once you think you've got it, go pick a data point on the graph or the table and articulate to yourself what that data point means. And maybe do that again and again, depending on how complex you find that particular table or graph. Do it a few times until you're like, okay, either got it and now I can go answer the question confidently, or you know what, I actually don't understand this graph. I should just guess randomly right now and move on to the next question.
And it's silly. Like this one, like I feel like I could not have gotten the second part of this question right without getting the first part right. And that's why I know that I made a silly mistake.
Yeah. And so some of these questions are like this, where it's got two parts to it, but the two parts are what's called jointly consistent, which means like you basically need the two parts. You need to do it together to be able to answer correctly. Yeah.
And then lastly, I got this one correct. And I just don't know how I did.
This is a tough one to get lucky to get correct on because of the mix of possible answers here. So you should feel more confident than you maybe feel right now. This one's called a two-part question. These can be pure math, pure verbal. They can be logic. They can basically test anything at all. These are the most versatile of the question types on the integrated reasoning section of the test. And what they're going to do is as the name implies, two-part, it's going to ask you two questions. So it looks like in this case, they asked you to support something and to undermine something. Those are the two columns. The interesting thing about this is that you're going to choose from the same set of answer choices for the two questions that they're asking you. These can also come in that jointly consistent flavor that I was talking about. They may or may not be jointly consistent, but sometimes you have to solve for the two things kind of together. And sometimes they're just independent of each other.
So now moving on to our verbal results. Again, I got 2 right out of 3.
You've got reading comprehension here. And these are everyone's done these if they've ever done a standardized test before. You get some passage. Often it's a topic that you find a little boring, and then you have to go answer some questions. On the test, you'll typically see 3. It's possible to see 4 questions that will all be associated with the same passage.
Yes. So I got that right. And then I got a sentence correction question correct.
These are the grammar questions. And I know you were feeling confident about grammar.
Yes. It would have been kind of embarrassing to have gotten this wrong. And then it's this is the reasoning question that I got.
So these are called critical reasoning, or we just kind of shorthand, we call these arguments. So they'll give some kind of an argument or a plan, someone saying like, we should do this in order to achieve some outcome, or, something like that. And then they're asking you to do some kind of analytical reasoning on that. So they might ask you to strengthen it or to weaken it, or, to analyze the argument in some way, like what's the flaw of the argument, something along those lines.
Yeah. So I need to get better at evaluating arguments. And then lastly, we have Quant. It was 2 little questions. The first one I got correct. I think this might just be a straightforward.
This is a straightforward problem solving question. I mean, the math might not be straightforward, but this is kind of just your standard math multiple choice question. So if you ever had a math multiple choice test, this is what the questions look like. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next one was a data sufficiency question that I did not get
this
right.
question type, like the integrated reasoning section, this all the questions in that section, this question type was invented for the GMAT. It only appears in the GMAT. It's a really cool question type, actually, but also it's bizarre when you first see it and you don't know what's going on. So data sufficiency is basically like, I'm not going to ask you to solve the math for me. I'm just asking you whether it's possible to solve the math. So you can see that this one's asking for the value of X, but you can also see that the answer choices, none of them have a value for X. So it's not actually like calculate the value of X. It's which piece of information or which pieces in combination, what information would be sufficient in order to be able to calculate the value of X. So at first, this feels really weird because this isn't how math tests usually work in school. Once you get used to it and get used to the processes that you're using to evaluate that information, these are awesome because you don't have to do the math. Like, you might have to do a little bit of math, but you're not doing the same kind of math that you would be doing on the regular problem solving questions where you really do have to go find the value of X.
Yeah. And for this one, I'm pretty sure I just straight up guessed because I could not for the life of me remember the rules for
Yeah, you'd need to know your exponent
exponents.
rules for this one.
Like a negative exponent. Like, I don't even remember.
But then this analysis is great, right? Because now you know on your list, oh, I got to go learn my exponent rules. So you're
Yes.
starting to put together your review list right here. How much experience? I know you had done some study for the GMAT, and I think had even taken the GMAT. But how much recent, like, there's different question types here. There's, there is some math you got to learn. Like, how much recent experience did you really have with all of
None, honestly.
So this is a really good starting point.
Yeah. All the math I've been doing has just been like work math,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of like percentages and
Which can come up. You didn't happen to get those today, but obviously
correct
that's also on the test. Yeah.
budgeting. And this is truly the stuff from high school that I just do not remember. I know that there's exponent rules.
You know they exist.
I know that they exist. I know that we should be
Yeah.
following those rules.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a combination of things here. Some of this stuff, like you said, is stuff that you and others studying for this test are already using every day at work. There are things around percentages or proportions, things around being able to read, graphs and charts of things, or, analyze something that's going on with some data. So some of this stuff dovetails very nicely with what you're already doing every day at work. There are, I'm going to call them like textbook-y type math questions, things that we did in high school or in some cases even in middle school. So there is some lift here to go and relearn some of those rules. None of it is stuff that you haven't already learned before. All of it goes up to maybe in the US system, maybe about 10th grade.
Yeah.
There's algebra. There's, it doesn't go to like trigonometry or calc or anything like that. There's stuff below algebra, like you might have to remember how to add fractions or find common denominators, things that we would have done at an even younger age.
Yes.
But they're using these really just to test your ability to to think about quantitative topics, to be able to analyze something, to be able to think logically about quant-based topics, basically. Because you're going to be doing a lot of that in grad school, but they're not going to test you on things that you will only learn in grad school. There's no accounting, there's no finance, there's no advanced statistics, although there is like high school level statistics.
Yeah. So that was the sampler. And then let's fast forward or go back in time to a couple days after I took this, and I did a practice exam. And this I'm really excited about.
So this is, so you were feeling like sort of half up, half down after the sampler.
I was feeling half up, half down. And then I took my EA practice exam and I got a 150.
Woohoo. And give it, do you know the significance of that number? Like, what's the scoring range? What does 150 mean?
150 is the median score, but I know that a competitive score on the EA can be as little as 155.
Depending on the program.
Depending on the program. So I was really excited because I'm only 5 away. But my question for you is, how hard is it to bridge that gap?
How hard are those 5 points? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'll also say before I answer that question, the 5 points, how hard it is to gain 5 points also depends on the starting and ending scores of those. Going from 150 to 155 is not as much of a lift as going from 160 to 165. So basically, the higher you go, the harder it is. Between a 150 and a 155, though, if you're looking for a program that's looking for a 155 kind of score, you're in really good shape starting out with a 150 coming into this cold. You can absolutely do what you need to do. It's going to take you, 4 to 8 weeks, depending upon how much time you actually have to study every week. But yeah, you're in good shape.
Yeah. I mean, this feels like a miracle, honestly. How much of this is luck?
it's very unlikely to be luck. These tests are built to, there's a little bit of leeway. Like you can have a couple questions where, ooh, I just guessed right or something. But given it's an hour and a half long test, it's asking you a lot of questions. It's not like you can just luckily score 10 points higher than you were really prepared to score.
Okay. Okay. Great. So so the EA is 40 questions. I did kind of rush through it. Each section, the max scores 20 points. I got 11 on IR, 11 on verbal reasoning, and 8 on quant.
And I'll mention, so essentially, what you need to average across all three sections in order to hit that 150 score is a 10 in each section. So Zach was a little bit up on each of the first few sections, and then that was balanced out by being down by a couple of points in quant. Depending on the school or the program, they may want to see that they may look at the subset section scores, they may not. And depending on how quant heavy that program is, I've seen some programs say we want to see, for example, at least a 10 in the quantitative reasoning, or we want to see a 155 overall, but we do want everything to be double digits or something like that. So you have to do your homework here too in terms of talking to your target programs to ask them, what do they want to see? What are their average scores for their students that they're admitting, and what do they consider to be a competitive score?
Yes. So I was feeling really good. Thought what was interesting was I spent about 2 minutes on every question I got incorrect, and about a minute and a half on every question I got correct.
So to some extent, that's expected in the sense that you'd expect your incorrect questions to be harder ones on average than the correct ones. So in general, you're spending a little bit more time because they're harder. We do look at that data though, because one of the things, and you'll want to go look at individual questions for this data as well. Like if there was a question that you just had no chance of answering, but you hung on to it for 3.5 minutes, the learning there is not, how do I get this question right next time? The learning there is, how do I get this question wrong faster next time? Because if you took 3.5 minutes to miss a question that is supposed to average 2 minutes, like that question is just not where the priority is. The
Right.
priority instead is, oh, I took 2 minutes on this one, or it's on that one that you made a careless mistake on, or those sorts of things, to clean those things up first. You're not trying to get perfect at it all because you're just trying to get the score that you need for the program. I suppose you could have bragging rights if you get a higher score, but other than that, like you've got a lot of things going on in your life. Do what you need to do to get the score that you want for your target programs, and then just do not worry about it after that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely don't want bragging rights.
It
I
only
have,
works in if you're in my profession, yeah, you got to get the higher score, but other than that.
yeah. So if you like going into it, I was shocked at how many IR questions I got right. It's a lot of questions, obviously, and we don't have time to review them all, but let's look at IR because that's the section that I think I spent the most care on. By the time I got to quant, I was like, I don't know exponent rules. I don't know this rule. I don't know
And
that
your
rule. I'm
brain
just going
was
to guess.
fried.
Yeah. But this is the one I spent a lot of time on and I thought was the most fun. And was surprised by how few questions I got incorrect. It was only 3.
So good. The integrated reasoning section is a mix of quant and verbal skills. I know that you have expressed that you feel more comfortable in general with the verbal material than with the quant material. So you're going to like the integrated reasoning section probably more than you're going to like the quant section, because it allows you to mix in those verbal skills when you would normally on other tests be doing like pure math. This will have, graphs or have math concepts involved, but it will be not asking you to do like heavy number crunching most of the time. It's more about how you can reason or think about that information in conjunction with analytically reasoning something as opposed to like, super brute force math. The test makers know that when you're in grad school and when you're at work, you have Excel, you have, you have all these other tools available to you. So that's not what the test is about. For this kind of thing, what you're going to want to do now that you've taken the test is you're going to look at your questions that you got right and the ones that you got wrong, actually. So we'll start with the ones that you get wrong. For the ones that you got wrong, you want to classify them into one of basically 3 big buckets. So one bucket is simply careless mistake. I truly did know how to do this going into the test. I made some kind of a careless mistake. You need to understand or tease out what was the mistake you made and why did you make it? And then what new habit can you put into place that will minimize that type of mistake in future? And I'll give you an example of one of these that I lived through as I was getting ready to take both the GMAT and the EA was I had a bad habit when I was like, oh, that's easy math. I'll just do it in my head. Well, you're more likely to make a careless mistake when you do something in your head than when you put it down on paper. And so I've trained myself over time. My remedy basically is I write everything down. I write it all down. It doesn't take any more time to write it than to think it. And that helps me to just slow down that extra half a second to
Mhm.
make sure that I'm not making a mental careless mistake.
Yeah.
So careless mistakes, why did you make the mistake? What can you change about your habits in future? And what new habits can you set to help you minimize those mistakes? The other two categories are less about like that kind of process and more about, okay, I've got something to learn here potentially. So the other two categories are I legit didn't know how to do this during the test. But now that I look at it, I see what the correct answer is. I actually feel more comfortable with this now. I do need to go learn it and practice it. And so you see what what the correct answer says, or you see what the math is that was going on or whatever it is. And then you make a note and you go and you study whatever that thing is. The other category is I legit didn't know how to do it during the test. And I still don't know. Like I'm still looking at this and just being like, whatever. I don't know what's going on. Those ones are your third priority. That's not where you start. You start by fixing the things that are easier to fix, which is category 1 and then category 2. Category 3 is like, I'm not going to do anything about that probably between now and my next practice test. I'm going to fix categories 1 and 2, which are easier to fix, and I'm going to see where that takes my score. And it's almost certainly going to be the case that you're going to get to your score without having to fix everything that falls into category 3 of like, I don't know what's going on with this question.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's on the ones you get wrong. On the ones that you get right, you're looking at them with an eye towards two things. The first is simply to confirm that you did legitimately get it right. So we had a question earlier where you were like, I don't know how I got this one right. You do need to go check and make sure that you did legitimately get it right and that it wasn't just a lucky guess. If it
Yeah.
was a lucky guess, then you classify this as a wrong answer for study purposes. So then you go through those categories we already talked about for incorrect answer. If it was legit right, then the other thing you're looking at is, did I do more work than I had to? Is there a way to streamline this, to use less time, to use less mental energy the next time I see something like this? Because then you can use that time and that mental energy elsewhere in the section.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm looking at question 13 here and I got it right, but I spent almost 4 minutes on it.
Yeah, and so the answer for something like that would be like, okay, so in future, although what was that one? The one place where that could, or which section are we in right now? We're in integrated
So this is
reasoning.
verbal actually, and I did
This
have
is
to,
verbal. If this was the first question of an RC passage, you will see the time jump up because you had to read the passage first
okay,
and
that
then
makes sense. Yeah.
that was so that and multi-source reasoning and integrated reasoning section, those are the two places where you can see the bump up in time when you get the first question out of a sequence because you got to process the information first before you can answer the first question.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. All right. So I took the practice exam. I feel like I've got a good baseline. What do I do next?
Okay, so do this analysis that I was talking about on
Yeah.
all the correct and the incorrect. And as you're going, you're going to type this out or write it down or wherever you want to keep your takeaways so that you get a list of like, these are the things that I want to prioritize between now and my next practice test. The next thing that you're going to need to do, which I don't think you've entirely done yet, is you're going to identify like, what resources am I going to use to learn this stuff? It's not just practice problems. As you noted, for example, you need to learn your exponent rules. So you need a resource that's going to teach you what the exponent rules are and then give you some like drills just to drill the pure math there. And so that's probably going to come from test prep companies. We have books and um, online courses and just whatever. Everybody decides how they want to study, and there are different programs out there. You can start to see a little bit of that material in our free starter kit. I also recommend going and looking at anyone else who's preparing people for the EA. Just go look at whatever they have for free, see what you like. But then at some point, it's probably going to involve like buying a book, or if you prefer to like be in a classroom with other people, to sign up for a class or something like that.
And I know I also have to keep looking at programs. I feel like I wanted to get
Yeah.
the score first.
just to see.
To make it feel a little more real.
Hmm. But yeah, so one of the things is also now to start going and looking at programs from two perspectives. One is just where might you want to go? Starting to get that set in your head. It's a long process. There's a lot of programs out there. The other is taking a look at what they say about what they're looking for in an applicant, including everything, but including the EA score, so that you can set a goal for yourself and you know what you're shooting for.
More homework.
I mean, you are studying, so yeah.
That's true. Thank you, Stacey.
My pleasure.